He should not have said it in front of everyone. But the moment her voice cracked across the room, there was no putting the lie back together. "Get your hands off him." The words hit the air like a glass breaking. Every head in town hall turned. I froze where I stood, Mara Sterling's fingers still wrapped around my arm like she owned it. Cameras weren't allowed inside the building, but in a small town you didn't need cameras. 20 pairs of eyes were already doing the recording. Mara blinked slowly, like she wasn't sure she heard right. Her smile didn't disappear. It just sharpened. "Elena," she said sweetly, "relax. We're just talking." Behind me, I heard the scrape of a chair. Then Elena Ward stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her eyes were hard enough to cut steel. The same eyes that had looked straight through me 3 months earlier and said we were strictly professional. The same woman who had told everyone in town that Caleb Harper was just the contractor fixing her roof. Just a builder. Just a friend. Nothing more. But the way she looked at Mara now said something very different. "You heard me," Elena said, her voice low and steady. "Take your hands off him." A murmur rolled through the room, because that sentence wasn't supposed to exist. Not from her, not after everything she had said before. Mara finally let go of my arm, slow and deliberate, like she was releasing something she planned to take back later. She looked from me to Elena and laughed under her breath. "Oh," she said softly, "so that's how it is now." Elena didn't answer. She just stepped closer until she was standing beside me, not behind me, beside me. Her shoulder brushed my arm for half a second before she pulled it back, like she'd touched something hotter than she expected. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. I should have said something then. I should have explained. But the truth was, I didn't understand what had just happened, any more than the rest of the room. Because the Elena I knew would never have done that. 3 months ago, she had looked me straight in the eye and said one thing very clearly. "We are strictly professional, Caleb." No hesitation, no confusion, no softness. And I had believed her. Hell, I had built my entire behavior around that line. I kept my distance, kept my voice calm, kept my hands to myself even during the storm when the whole damn house felt like it might rip apart. So hearing her defend me like that in public didn't just surprise the room, it knocked the ground out from under me. Across the table, Sterling leaned back in his chair, watching everything with the calm patience of a man who liked chaos as long as it belonged to other people. His lawyer cleared his throat. "Are we finished with the theatrics?" he said dryly. But nobody was listening to him. The whole room was watching Elena, watching the woman who had spent the last 2 months insisting nothing was happening between us, and now looked like she was ready to fight someone over it. Mara tilted her head. "You're being very dramatic for someone who said you two were just friends." Elena's jaw tightened. For a second I thought she might walk it back, say something polite. Pretend the moment never happened. That would have been the safe choice. But Elena Ward had never been very good at choosing the safe option. Her eyes flicked toward me for half a second, just long enough for me to see the war going on behind them. Then she turned back to Mara. "I said," she repeated slowly, "get your hands off him." Mara raised her palms in mock surrender. "Fine," she said lightly. "He's all yours." The words hung there, ugly, intentional, designed to spread through town like gasoline. I felt Elena stiffen beside me. She hated being cornered, hated being turned into a story other people could tell. Sterling finally leaned forward, folding his hands together on the table. "This hearing is about property boundaries," he said calmly, "not whatever this is." The mayor nodded quickly. "Yes. Let's focus." But the focus in that room was already broken. Once people smell something personal, they don't go back to paperwork. They start watching faces instead. Watching the small things. The way Elena's hand rested on the edge of the table close to mine. The way she didn't step away. The way I didn't move either. Sterling's lawyer slid a stack of documents forward. "Mr. Sterling's updated survey clearly shows." "Elena." The mayor's voice cut in gently. "Are you represented by counsel today?" She shook her head once. "No. You understand this process could become complicated." "I understand." Her voice didn't shake, but I could feel the tension running through her like a wire pulled too tight. That's when I pushed my folder forward. "I have documentation," I said evenly. Sterling's eyes moved to me, cold, interested, like he had just noticed the nail sticking out of the board. "And you are?" the lawyer asked. "Caleb Harper," I said. "Contractor on the property. Not a legal party." "No," I agreed calmly. "But I am the one who pulled certified copies of the original deed and located the boundary marker your client conveniently ignored." A ripple moved through the room. Sterling's smile thinned. I opened the folder. Photos, survey copies, Hensley's affidavit, all lined up in clean plastic sleeves. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. "Before anyone redraws a map," I said, "we should probably look at the line that's been there longer than any of us." The lawyer started flipping through the papers. Sterling watched him, then looked at Elena. For the first time since walking into that room, he didn't look confident. He looked annoyed. The mayor adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "Well," he said slowly, "that certainly complicates things." Mara had gone quiet behind us, but I could still feel her eyes burning into the back of my neck. Sterling finally leaned back in his chair again. "Interesting," he murmured, but his tone had changed. Just slightly. Like a man realizing the game might take longer than he expected. The mayor tapped his pen against the table. "I'm going to review this evidence," he said. "Until then, this hearing is paused." Chairs scraped, people stood. The quiet explosion of small-town gossip began instantly. And right in the middle of it, Elena was still standing beside me. Silent, rigid, like she had just jumped off a roof and was waiting to see if she survived the landing. I leaned a little closer so only she could hear me. "You didn't have to do that." Her eyes flicked toward mine, dark, exhausted, determined. "Yes," she said quietly, "I did." And that's when I realized something that made the whole situation even more dangerous. Because Elena Ward didn't snap like that over nothing, which meant the real question wasn't why she said those words. The real question was something else. What had she been holding back all this time? That finally made her stop pretending we were just friends? The town hall emptied slowly. Not because the meeting mattered anymore, but because people wanted a better look at the two of us standing there like something had just cracked open. In a small town, moments like that were oxygen. Elena didn't move for a long time. Her hands were still braced against the table, fingers spread like she needed the wood to keep her steady. Finally, she exhaled. "You didn't have to bring those documents," she said quietly. Her voice had gone back to that controlled tone she used when she was trying to rebuild walls around herself. "I did," I said. She nodded once, like she expected that answer. Then she gathered her papers with careful, deliberate movements. Everything straight, everything squared. Elena liked order almost as much as I did. Outside the courthouse, the sky was pale gray, and the wind had picked up again. Sterling's black SUV was still parked across the street. He leaned against the door, talking quietly to Mara. They stopped when we stepped out. Elena noticed. Her shoulders tightened. "That's not going to be the end of it," she said under her breath. "It never was," I replied. Sterling straightened slowly. For a second, I thought he might walk over. Instead, he just smiled. Not friendly, patient. Like a man who had already decided how the story ended. Then he opened the SUV door and got inside. Mara lingered a moment longer. Her eyes moved between Elena and me, still calculating, still amused. Then she followed him. The engine started and the SUV rolled away. Elena watched it until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Only then did her shoulders drop. "Thank you," she said quietly. It was the first time I'd heard those words from her. I nodded. "You're welcome." She didn't move. Neither did I. Because the truth sitting between us was still heavy. The truth that 3 months ago she had made one rule very clear. Strictly professional. I finally broke the silence. "Back there," I said carefully, "you might want to tell people you were just reacting in the moment." Her head snapped toward me. "What?" "If the gossip gets loud," I said calmly, "you can say you were just upset. Protect your reputation." Her expression hardened instantly. "You think I care about gossip right now?" I think Sterling does, I said. That stopped her. Her jaw worked for a second. Then she looked away. You're still thinking like a contractor, she muttered. What does that mean? You fix damage, she said quietly. You prevent future problems. That's the job. She studied me for a long moment. Then something in her face shifted, softened just a little. You've been doing that since the day we met. That sentence pulled me backward 3 months. Back to the first time I saw Elena Ward standing behind Holloway's hardware. Back to the day everything started. The wind had been cold that morning too, sharp enough to cut through denim and flannel. I was loading tools into my truck when Robert Sterling walked out of the store with that same calm smile he wore in town hall. Elena stood beside him, arms folded tight, eyes angry. You're overcharging her, Sterling said casually. I closed the tailgate. No. His smile widened slightly. You might want to reconsider. I didn't. Elena signed the contract, I said. Roof repair, standard rate. Sterling glanced at her, then back at me. She's under financial pressure, he said lightly. You could help. Elena stiffened beside him. I understood the game instantly. Sterling wasn't negotiating. He was testing how easy I would be to push. Men like him did that before deciding how much trouble someone was worth. No, I said again. 3 witnesses stood near the propane racks watching. Sterling's smile thinned. You're new in this town, he said quietly. Not that new. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he shrugged. Well, he said smoothly, we'll see how things go. He walked away. Elena stayed. The wind whipped her dark hair loose from its tie. She watched Sterling's SUV disappear down the road. Then she looked at me like she was trying to solve a problem. Why did you do that? She asked. Do what? Say no to him. I leaned against the truck. Because the contract already says yes. Her eyes narrowed. You understand what he can do, right? I understand what he tried. She studied me for another long second. Then she said the sentence that set the rules for everything that followed. Just the roof, she said firmly. I'm sorry? Just the roof, she repeated. You fix the roof and nothing else. That was the plan. And we are strictly professional. The words were clipped, controlled, like she had practiced them in her head before saying them. I nodded once. Works for me. Quote. Her shoulders eased a fraction. Good. Then I pointed toward her car. Your rear tire is losing air. She blinked. What? Left side. She glanced down. Sure enough, the rubber sagged against the gravel. First freeze and that'll slide, I said. Her mouth opened slightly. You noticed that. I notice things. She followed my gaze toward the passenger seat. Papers had slipped across the dashboard. Legal papers, county letterhead. Big black stamps. Judgment. Dead. Leanne. Elena saw where I was looking. Her hand shot out to grab the papers, but not before I read enough to understand. Her shoulders dropped. My ex-husband hid the debt, she said quietly. The words came out flat, like she had already repeated them 100 times to banks and lawyers. And the judge split it anyway. I nodded slowly. How long? 60 days. For what? The lien. She swallowed. If I can't refinance before, then the bank forces a sale. And Sterling knows that. Yes. The wind rattled a loose sign on the building. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Sterling's SUV rolled back into the lot, right on schedule. The window slid down. He held out a thick envelope. Monday, he said calmly. Bring your checkbook or let the lien clock finish its work. Elena took the envelope with a stiff arm, didn't open it. Sterling smiled at me, then drove away again. Silence sat in the gravel lot. Elena looked down at the envelope in her hand. Her fingers were trembling. You don't need to get involved in this, she said quietly. I'm not. You already did. Not really. She finally opened the envelope. Inside was an offer, a low one, the kind designed to look generous to people who didn't understand pressure. "He wants a fire sale," she whispered. "Yeah." Her eyes lifted to mine, sharp again, guarded again. "Just the roof," she repeated. I nodded. 7 tomorrow morning. 7, she said, like it was the only solid thing she had left. I climbed into my truck, but before I started the engine, I looked back once. Elena was still standing there in the wind, holding that envelope, trying to look like it didn't scare her. That was the moment I realized something important. Because Elena Ward didn't need someone to save her. She needed someone who wouldn't walk away while the whole structure was collapsing around her. And the strange thing was, I already knew exactly where the weak beams were. The first morning I showed up at Elena's house, she was already standing on the porch waiting, 7 sharp. Some people say 7 when they mean sometime after breakfast. Elena meant exactly 7. The gravel under my tires hadn't even settled before she stepped down from the porch. Clipboard in her hands, hair pulled tight, eyes tired but alert like someone who hadn't slept much. "You're on time," she said. "You told me to be." She nodded once, then handed me a mug of coffee without smiling. "Roof first." I stepped onto the porch boards. They dipped under my weight just enough to make my boots feel it. Not obvious, but wrong. I crouched and pressed my palm against the wood. "Not the roof," I said. Her head snapped up. "The contract says roof." Quote, "The contract doesn't matter if you fall through your own porch." Her jaw tightened instantly. "That's extra work. That's gravity." She crossed her arms. "I told you I don't need a hero." "Good," I said calmly. "Because I'm a builder." The wind rattled the loose corner of a gutter. She watched me for a long moment, then stepped aside. "Fine," she muttered. 5 minutes. Inside the house smelled like old pine and dust, the kind of place that had been taken care of once but hadn't had the time or money lately. I laid my tools out on the living room floor the way I always did. Straight line. Meter, driver, probe. Each one parallel. Order calmed my hands. Elena leaned against the doorway watching. She didn't say anything, but I saw her shoulders drop a little, like the neat line of tools made the room quieter. The furnace closet door sat open in the hallway. Panels off, wires exposed. "The furnace turns on, then shuts off," she said. "Last guy wanted 3 grand. Last guy didn't want to crawl." I knelt down and traced the pressure line with my fingers. Kinked hose, clogged trap, dirty flame sensor. 20 minutes later, the igniter glowed. The burners lit in a clean row. Warm air pushed into the hallway. Elena stepped closer to the vent. Her hand hovered above it, pulled back, then reached again like she didn't trust comfort. "It's running," she said quietly. "Yeah." She looked at me differently then, still guarded, but curious. "Show me you can do that to everything else." I wiped my hands on a rag. "Show me Sterling's paperwork." She hesitated, then slid a folder across the kitchen table. Inside were maps, survey sketches, legal letters. Sterling was claiming a strip of land down by the creek, the only flat place a septic system could go. Without that land, the house would lose half its value. "Who did the original survey?" I asked. "Tom Hensley." "Still around?" "Retired." I studied the map. Sterling's line was too clean, too perfect for his plan. That always bothered me. "We verified the markers," I said. "With what?" she asked. "A prayer?" "With proof." Her eyes flicked toward the lien notice. Then, back to me. "You don't have to get pulled into this," she said. "I know. And we are still strictly professional." I nodded. "Your call." For a long moment she stared at the folder. Then she slid it across the table. "In," she said quietly. That was the moment the job stopped being about shingles. By noon I had the porch boards pulled up. The support post underneath looked solid until I tapped it with a screwdriver. The tip sank straight through. Wet mush. That's what slow water does. It doesn't shout. It just waits and rots. What holds you up eventually gives way. Elena stood a few steps back, watching. "You've been walking on that every day," I said. "Yeah." "And you're still here." She crossed her arms again. You say that like it means something. It does. I slid the bottle jack under the beam, stacked cribbing blocks square, checked the level twice. Stay back, I told her. I am back. She wasn't. But she stayed clear of the danger zone. The jack handle turned slowly. The porch groaned. Nails squealed. Then the weight shifted. Settled. Like a fist unclenching. I cut away the rotten base, set a new metal anchor, dropped a fresh treated post into place. When the jack came down, the porch didn't sag. It held. Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You fixed it, she said, for now. She studied the new post, like she was trying to memorize what stability looked like. Why are you doing all this? She asked. Because you hired me. That's not the whole reason. No. She waited. I shrugged. Bad structure bothers me. That answer seemed to satisfy something in her. Inside, she made grilled cheese and tomato soup. Simple, but it tasted like effort. She didn't say thank you. She just refilled my coffee. That was her version. After lunch, we drove to the county records office. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The clerk behind the glass watched us with that small-town curiosity that never really sleeps. Deed copies, old surveys, anything mentioning the creek. By noon, we had a stack of certified papers, enough to make Sterling nervous. Where's Hensley now? I asked. Orchard Road. So we drove. The old surveyor answered the door with a cane and a suspicious glare. He didn't even sit down when he saw the map. That strip is hers, he said immediately. Always was. Inside, he pulled a field notebook from a drawer. Yellow pages. Precise handwriting. He tapped a mark on the sketch. Stone marker at the creek bend, he said. I set the iron pin from that rock. Elena watched his pen move as he wrote a short, sworn statement. Each line felt like someone hammering a nail back into place. You don't let people scare you into selling land, Hensley said. Or your self-respect. Elena nodded once. She still didn't say thank you, but her shoulders straightened. Sunday morning, we walked down to the creek. The water ran dark and fast along the bank. Bare branches rattled overhead. It's gone, Elena said after 10 minutes. Or Sterling moved it. Maybe. I kept walking. The bend in the creek came into view, a flat stone half buried in mud. Moss covered most of it. I brushed it away with my glove. A shallow cross mark appeared. Elena's breath caught. That's it. Quote, photograph it. Wide shot, close shot, video with location stamp, measurements from the fence, evidence. Boring winds in court. By the time we climbed back up the bank, the sky had darkened. Storm clouds rolled over the hills. Wind pushed colder air down the valley. The warning came that afternoon. Heavy rain. Freeze overnight. We spent the rest of the day turning worry into work. Downspouts extended. Drain trench dug. Sandbags stacked near the crawl space vent. Elena worked beside me the whole time, holding boards, passing screws, learning my rhythm faster than most helpers ever did. Inside, the furnace hummed steady. She poured coffee, set a mug in front of me without asking. Storms used to make my ex look like a hero, she said suddenly. How? He'd shout, drive fast, do one big loud thing. And then he'd disappear for a week. I nodded. Tonight isn't about heroics. What is it about? Not letting water win. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Night came fast. Wind hit first. Then the rain. Hard. Sideways. The lights flickered once. Twice. Then the power died. A second later, the generator kicked on. Soft yellow light filled the living room again. Elena stood by the window watching the dark yard. He might come tonight, she said quietly. Sterling? He likes storms. They hide witnesses. I grabbed my jacket. If he shows up, we'll hear him. Then a loud bang slammed against the side of the house. Metal clanged again. The gutter, I said. I stepped outside. Rain hit my face like needles. The ladder went up against the wall. Elena planted her boots behind it. Don't let it move, I told her. It won't. Wind pushed against the ladder as I climbed. The loose gutter whipped back and forth. One hand grabbed it. The other drove screws into solid wood. A strong gust rocked the ladder. Elena's boots slid in the mud, then locked in place. "I've got you," she called. When I climbed down, we were both soaked. Rain ran down her hair. Her breathing was fast. She swayed slightly. My hand went to her waist before I thought about it, just steadying her. Her body went tense, but she didn't pull away. We stood there for a second in the storm, close enough to hear each other breathe. Inside the kitchen, warmth wrapped around us. The furnace hummed. Rain battered the windows. Elena looked at me like she was standing on the edge of something. "My ex used to promise things," she said quietly. "And?" "He never stayed long enough to keep them." I grabbed a towel and set it on the chair beside her. "I'm not asking you to trust me." "Then what are you asking?" "That you decide what you want." She stepped closer, slow, careful. Her hand pressed flat against my chest, not grabbing, testing, checking if I was real. And solid, her fingers curled in my shirt. Just a little. Then she kissed me. Not soft, not hesitant. Like someone who had been holding their breath too long. When we broke apart, her forehead rested against mine. "This doesn't fix everything," she whispered. "I know, but it helps." Outside, the storm kept hitting the house. Inside, the walls held. And that was the night everything between us stopped being just professional, which meant the moment she defended me in town hall wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was the moment she finally stopped pretending the truth didn't exist. The courtroom felt smaller than it should have, not because the room was cramped, because every pair of eyes inside it was waiting for someone to break. Sterling sat at the front table like a man who had already decided the ending. His suit was perfect, his smile quiet, the kind of calm that comes from money and patience. Elena sat beside me on the wooden bench. Her folder rested on her knees. Her hands were steady, but I could see the tension in the way her fingers pressed into the paper. The judge stepped in. Everyone stood. Then we sat again. Sterling's lawyer started first. He spoke smoothly, confident, like the words had already been rehearsed. "Mr. Sterling's updated survey clearly establishes the boundary line along the eastern bank of the creek." He slid a map forward. Clean lines, professional print, expensive, the kind of document that made people nervous before they even read it. Elena's fingers tightened around her folder. I leaned forward slightly. "You're okay," I murmured. She nodded once, but her breathing had changed. The lawyer continued. "If Ms. Ward cannot access the strip of land required for a septic replacement, the property loses compliance with county standards." He paused, letting the implications sit in the room, which would make a sale difficult. Translation: force the sale now, before the lien clock runs out. Sterling leaned back in his chair, watching Elena, waiting for the pressure to do its job. But Elena didn't look at him. She looked at the judge. Then she opened her folder. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "I have documentation that contradicts that survey." The lawyer smiled faintly. "From whom?" "From the original surveyor." That caught attention. Elena placed Hensley's sworn statement on the table, then the photographs. Then the certified deed copies, everything organized, straight, like she had watched me line tools on the floor 100 times and learned the rhythm. The judge adjusted his glasses. He studied the document slowly. The room went quiet. Sterling's lawyer leaned over the table to read. His confidence started to fade. The judge finally looked up. "This marker," he said, "the stone at the creek bend." "Yes, Your Honor," Elena said. "You located it?" Quote, "With help." The judge's eyes moved to me for a moment, then back to the papers. "And the original survey was set using that marker?" "Yes." Sterling's lawyer cleared his throat. "That rock could have been placed later." The judge looked at him. "Are you suggesting the creek moved to accommodate this rock?" A ripple of laughter passed through the benches. The lawyer flushed. "No, Your Honor." The judge leaned back. Then he looked at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," he said evenly, "it appears your updated survey disregards the original marker." Sterling's jaw tightened. "It reflects a more accurate modern measurement." The judge tapped the affidavit with his pen. The original surveyor disagrees. Silence. Sterling's smile disappeared. The judge nodded slowly. I'm issuing a temporary injunction. Quote, the words dropped into the room like a hammer. Mr. Sterling will cease all interference with Ms. Ward's property until a full survey review is completed. Sterling's lawyer opened his mouth. The judge raised a hand, and given the lean timeline, the court recommends expedited review. The gavel came down once. The sound echoed through the room. For a second, nobody moved. Then the air changed. Sterling stood first. His calm mask had cracks now, small ones, but visible. This isn't finished, he said quietly. The judge didn't look impressed. Most legal matters aren't. Sterling turned and walked out of the courtroom without another word. Mara followed him. Her phone stayed in her pocket for once. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter, like the pressure had lifted a few inches off everyone's shoulders. Elena stood on the steps and took a deep breath. We didn't lose, she said. No. We didn't win either. No, I agreed. But we bought time. She looked at me. Time, she repeated softly. Then she laughed once, not loud, but real. Across the street, Sterling climbed into his SUV. The engine started. He didn't look back when he drove away. Elena watched until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. Then she turned toward me. You know what the bank said this morning? What? If the property line holds, they'll approve the sale. That's good. Yes. But she didn't sound relieved. Just thoughtful. What happens when it's over? She asked. You sell the house. And then? That part's your decision. She studied my face. You talk about life like construction. Everything has a foundation. She smiled slightly. And what happens if you build something and realize you don't want to leave it? Quote. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped closer, not crowding her, just close enough that the space between us felt honest. You decide whether it's worth staying. Her eyes searched mine, testing, like the first night in the kitchen, like the moment her hand touched my chest in the storm. Then she did something that made half the people on those courthouse steps stop pretending they weren't watching. She stepped forward and kissed me. Right there. No hiding, no excuses. Just a quiet, certain decision. When she pulled back, her hand stayed on my chest. Her voice was softer now. I told everyone we were just friends. I remember. I lied. Why? Because I was scared of needing someone again. Her fingers curled lightly in my jacket. But you didn't run, she said. You stayed. I nodded once. That's what builders do. 2 weeks later, the survey review finished. The result matched the original deed exactly. The stone marker held. Sterling's claim collapsed. The bank approved Elena's sale at full value. The lien disappeared. Debt gone. Freedom signed on a stack of paperwork in a quiet office downtown. When she walked back into the house that evening, she stood in the kitchen for a long time holding her phone. It's over, she whispered. The furnace hummed softly behind the wall. The porch didn't creak anymore. Rain from a small afternoon shower ran down the new downspout and away from the foundation. You're free, I said. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She crossed the room fast and pressed her forehead against my chest. Not desperate, just relieved. My arms wrapped around her waist. Steady, solid. What now? She asked quietly. Now you build whatever comes next. She leaned back enough to look up at me. Her smile was small, but certain. Then stay, she said. I didn't give her a speech. Builders don't make long promises. We make foundations. So I kissed her. Slow. No storm outside, no court hearing waiting. Just two people standing in a warm kitchen where the house finally felt quiet. Later, I stepped out onto the porch to check the last railing post. Old habit. The creek moved calmly around the bend where the stone marker still sat, doing the job it had always done, holding the line. Behind me, the front door opened. Elena stepped out and slid her hand into mine. She had once told the entire town we were just friends. But when someone tried to take me from her, she didn't hesitate. And sometimes the clearest truth in the world is the moment someone stops pretending. Because houses collapse slowly, but the right person walking in at the right time can make the whole thing stand again. The day after the closing, the house felt different. Not quieter, just lighter. The kind of quiet that comes when pressure finally lets go of something it has been squeezing for too long. Elena stood at the kitchen counter staring at the email from the title company like she expected it to disappear if she blinked. "It's really done," she said. "Yes. The lien. Gone. The debt. Gone." She let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for years. Then she laughed once, soft, almost disbelieving. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me there's another page." I leaned against the doorway. "There isn't." She looked around the kitchen, the same room where we had eaten grilled cheese during the storm, the same place where she had first kissed me like she needed to prove something to herself. But now there were cardboard boxes stacked against the wall, half her life already packed. "You know," she said quietly, "this place almost broke me." The words weren't bitter, just honest. "The house?" I asked. "No." She shook her head. "The fear." Her fingers brushed the countertop. "The waiting." I understood that. Waiting could rot a person from the inside faster than water rotted wood. "So," I said carefully, "where are you going?" She turned toward me. "That's the question." Her eyes searched my face. "You didn't ask me to stay," she said. "I told you to decide." "That's not the same thing." "No," I agreed, "it isn't." Silence filled the kitchen. The furnace kicked on softly. Warm air rolled through the hallway. Finally, she crossed the room, stopped in front of me. Close enough that I could see the faint line where stress used to sit between her eyebrows. It was gone now. "You know what scares me most?" she said. "What?" "Leaving." "Why?" Quote, "Because this is the first place in years that stopped feeling like a fight." Her hand slid into mine. "Because of you." I didn't squeeze her hand, didn't rush the moment, just let it exist. "You don't need this house anymore," I said. "I know." "You don't need this town either." "I know that too." Her eyes softened. "But I might need you." The words sat there between us, simple, heavy. Builders understand weight. You don't rush to carry it until you know the foundation can hold. "You don't need me?" I said gently. She shook her head. "You're wrong." Her voice was quiet, but certain. "I needed someone who didn't leave when things got ugly. You got through it yourself. I didn't do it alone." She stepped closer. Our shoulders touched. "You stayed when it was inconvenient. You stayed when people started talking. You stayed when Sterling tried to make things messy." Her fingers tightened around mine. "That matters." I studied her face, trying to see if the fear from 3 months ago was still there. It wasn't. What I saw instead was something steadier. Choice. "So what do you want?" I asked. She didn't hesitate this time. "I want a fresh start." "That's good. And I want it with you." That answer hit harder than anything Sterling ever said in court. Because fighting a bully is easy compared to building a life with someone. One requires strength. The other requires trust. "You're sure?" I asked. Her mouth curved slightly. "You're the one who said everything needs a foundation." "Yeah." "Well," she said softly, "I found mine." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she leaned up and kissed me. Slow. Certain. No storm pushing us together. No courtroom forcing decisions. Just two people choosing the same direction. Later that afternoon, we finished packing the last of her boxes. Most of them went into a rented trailer. Clothes, books, old photos she almost threw away but didn't. Memories have strange weight. When everything was loaded, we stood in the yard looking at the house. The porch stood straight now. The new post held firm. The gutters didn't rattle. Water flowed down the new pipe and away from the foundation. It looked like a house that had been taken care of, not a house that had been fighting to survive. Elena slipped her hand into mine. "I thought leaving would feel sad," she admitted. "Does it?" Quote, "No." She watched the wind move through the trees along the creek. "It feels like finishing a chapter." "That's because it is." She nodded slowly. "Do you ever think about that stone by the creek?" she asked. "The marker?" "Yes. It's older than the town," I said. "It's older than Sterling." She smiled. "And it still holds the line." "That's what good markers do." Her fingers squeezed mine. "I like that." We climbed into the truck together. The trailer rattled softly behind us as we rolled down the gravel drive. Halfway to town, Elena glanced over. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "people are going to talk." "They already do." "About us." I shrugged. "Let them." She studied me for a moment, then smiled wider than I had ever seen before. "I used to care about that." "What changed?" "You." Quote. The road curved past the creek. For a moment I saw the bend where the stone marker sat hidden in moss, holding the same quiet line it always had, steady, unmoved. Elena followed my gaze. "You know what I realized?" she said. "What?" "Some lines aren't there to keep people out." "What are they for?" "To show you where to build." I reached over and took her hand again. The truck rolled forward, past the town, past the courthouse, past the hardware store where everything had started, toward whatever came next. And the truth was simple. Some people walk into your life during the worst storm you've ever seen. They don't promise to fix everything. They just stay long enough to help you rebuild. And sometimes, that's the only foundation you ever needed. Morning came slow on the new place. Not with alarms, not with pressure. Just light sliding through the kitchen window and the quiet sound of coffee dripping into a glass pot. I was already awake. Builders get used to mornings long before the sun shows up. The house we had rented sat outside town, closer to the tree line than the road. Smaller than Elena's old place. Simpler, too. No sagging porch. No angry paperwork waiting on the counter. Just wood floors that creaked a little and a view of the creek running behind the property. Elena walked into the kitchen wearing one of my old flannel shirts and socks that didn't match. Her hair was still messy from sleep. She looked at the coffee like it was the most important invention in human history. "You're up early," she mumbled. "I'm always up early." She poured a mug and leaned against the counter. For a moment she just stood there quietly, listening to the morning. Then she looked around the kitchen. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "There's nothing chasing me today." No bank calls, no legal notices. No Sterling, just quiet. She stepped over and rested her head against my shoulder. I forgot what calm feels like. "You'll get used to it." "I hope not." That made me smile. "Why?" "Because I never want to forget how hard it was to earn it." Quote. Outside the window, a truck rolled up the gravel road. I recognized it immediately. Elena noticed the change in my posture. "Who is that?" "Probably the fence guy." Her eyebrows lifted. "You already hired someone?" "Yep." "For what?" I nodded toward the backfield. "For the property line." She laughed softly. "You're still thinking like a builder." "Always." We walked outside together. The air smelled like wet grass and pine. The creek behind the house curved through the trees the same way it did on her old property. Calm, unbothered. The fence contractor climbed out of his truck and waved. "Morning," he called. "Morning," I replied. He looked toward the creek line. "Where you want the posts?" I glanced at Elena. "This part's yours." She stepped forward slowly. For a second she looked almost nervous. Then she walked toward the edge of the yard. The grass there dipped gently toward the water. She stopped, looked out across the land, then turned back to the contractor. "Right here," she said, "straight line to that oak tree." Quote. The man nodded and started unloading his equipment. Elena watched him for a moment. Then she turned back to me. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "The last time I dealt with a property line, I was terrified." "And now?" She slipped her hand into mine. Now it just feels like the beginning of something. We stood there, watching the first post go into the ground. Solid, straight, exactly where it needed to be. After a few minutes, Elena spoke again. You ever think about Sterling? Sometimes. What do you think he's doing now? Probably trying to move someone else's fence. She laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came easy now. Good luck to him. The fence contractor hammered the post down until the ground swallowed the base. Then he stepped back. Checked the alignment. Perfect. Elena watched quietly. You were right, she said. About what? Structure. Yeah? She nodded. Once the foundation is solid, everything else becomes easier. I squeezed her hand gently. That's the idea. She looked up at me. Eyes clear. No fear hiding behind them anymore. Just certainty. You know what the best part is? She asked. What? I didn't just rebuild my life. Her fingers tightened around mine. I found someone who builds with me. I didn't answer with words. I kissed her instead. Slow, easy. Like the kind of moment you don't rush because you know there's nowhere else you need to be. When we pulled apart, the fence line behind us had already started taking shape. Post by post, strong, straight. A boundary that protected what mattered. But not something meant to keep the world out. Just something that showed where the real work began. Elena rested her head against my shoulder again. Do you ever think about that stone marker by the creek? She asked quietly. The one on your old property? Yes. It's still there. She nodded. That stone held the line for years without moving. That's what good foundations do. She smiled softly. And you know what I realized? What? Some lines exist to separate people. She looked up at me. But the right one shows you exactly where your life is supposed to begin. Quote, behind us, another fence post went into the ground, then another, and another. Slow work, but strong work, the kind that lasts. Elena's fingers stayed wrapped in mine, and for the first time since the day I met her in that cold hardware parking lot, nothing in our lives was collapsing anymore. Because the truth about love is simple. Anyone can promise to stay when life is easy, but the person who stands beside you while everything is falling apart is the one worth building forever with.